The sun had barely risen over the jagged hills of the Wild West when the small settlement began to stir. Dust swirled along the dirt streets as people prepared for another day in a land that was as beautiful as it was unforgiving. Among them was an Apache woman whose beauty was the talk of the nearby towns. She was graceful, with dark hair that flowed like a river at night and eyes that seemed to carry the wisdom of her ancestors. But her beauty was not just skin deep. She was known for her intelligence, her quick thinking, and a quiet strength that few could match. The Apache woman lived alone on the outskirts of the town, in a modest shelter she had built herself. She was self-reliant and proud, traits that made her respected by some and envied by others. Life in the settlement was harsh, and the people here had learned to rely on their own skills to survive. But despite the hardships, the woman had always managed to earn the respect of those who knew her well. She could hunt, track, and care for herself in ways that most people in town could not imagine. One morning, a disturbance shattered the quiet. A group of outlaws known for raiding settlements and leaving destruction in their wake rode into the area. They had heard of the town's small prosperity and wanted to take what they could. Panic spread quickly among the townspeople as the outlaws approached. Men grabbed their weapons and women hid their children, but the Apache woman was caught off guard. She had been gathering water from the nearby creek when the first shots rang out. Her instincts told her to run, but before she could escape, a stray bullet hit her leg. The pain was sharp and immediate, causing her to collapse to the ground. She tried to move, but her body would not respond the way it should. She realized with growing fear that she could not stand. Something was terribly wrong. Her legs refused to obey her, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely vulnerable. As she struggled to comprehend what had happened, she looked up at the people around her. One by one, they turned and ran, abandoning her to the fate that seemed inevitable. Some whispered fearful words to themselves about curses and bad omens, while others simply ignored her cries for help. She lay there in the dirt, her proud spirit fighting against despair. But the reality was harsh. She was alone, injured, and completely helpless. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The Apache woman's throat grew dry and her body ached from lying on the hard ground. She thought about her life, her family, and the ancestors who had taught her to survive. Memories of her childhood, hunting trips with her tribe, and lessons from her elders filled her mind. These memories gave her strength, but they could not change her current situation. The people who were supposed to be her neighbors had abandoned her, leaving her to face a cruel world on her own. As the day wore on, danger continued to lurk around every corner. Wild animals prowled nearby, drawn by the scent of someone weak and vulnerable. The woman tried to call out for help, but her voice was faint, almost swallowed by the vast emptiness around her. She thought about crawling towards safety, but every movement sent waves of pain through her body. She realized that if she didn't find help soon, she might not survive the night. While the town continued with its daily life, whispers of what had happened reached the ears of a man who had long retired from his duties as a sheriff. He lived quietly on the edge of the settlement, preferring solitude and reflection after years spent enforcing the law. Yet, despite his retirement, he had not lost the sense of justice that had guided him through decades of service. When he heard the rumors about the abandoned Apache woman, something stirred inside him. The retired sheriff remembered the early days of his career, when he had sworn to protect the innocent and stand against cruelty wherever it appeared. He had seen many people suffer, and he knew the consequences of leaving someone in danger. Without hesitation, he gathered his supplies and mounted his horse. His mind was set on one purpose: to find the woman and ensure that she survived. As he rode through the hills, he thought about what he might find. The stories he had heard painted a grim picture, and he knew the challenge ahead would not be easy. The terrain was harsh, the sun unrelenting, and the distance long, yet his determination was stronger than any obstacle. He had spent his life protecting people, and now, even in retirement, he would not turn away from someone in need. Back in the settlement, the Apache woman's situation grew more desperate. Shadows lengthened as the day passed, and she realized she would need to conserve her energy if she hoped to survive. She remembered the survival lessons taught to her by her tribe: finding shelter, staying hydrated, and keeping the mind focused on hope. With great effort, she dragged herself toward a small clump of bushes that offered some shade and minimal protection from the elements. The night fell, bringing a chill that made her shiver uncontrollably. Alone, paralyzed, and abandoned, she faced the harsh reality of the Wild West. The sounds of distant coyotes and the rustle of leaves reminded her that she was truly alone. Yet amid the fear and pain, a small ember of hope remained. She believed that someone might come, that a kind soul could find her before it was too late. Meanwhile, the retired sheriff rode tirelessly through the hills. He knew the terrain well, having patrolled it for years, and his experience guided him as he searched. His heart pounded with a mixture of worry and determination. Every step he took, every glance he cast across the dusty horizon, was filled with hope that he would reach the woman before nightfall. He did not know exactly what he would find, only that he could not ignore someone in such peril. By the time the first stars appeared in the sky, the retired sheriff spotted a faint movement near the creek where the woman had been gathering water. He slowed his horse, careful not to startle her, and saw the fragile figure lying on the ground. Her dark hair was matted with dirt, and her eyes reflected a mixture of pain and despair. Without a moment's hesitation, he dismounted and rushed to her side. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, kneeling beside her. His voice carried a calm authority, the kind that gave her a glimmer of comfort. She looked at him, unsure if this was another illusion, but the sincerity in his eyes told her that she was finally safe. He carefully examined her injuries, realizing that she had been paralyzed from the waist down. He knew that moving her would be difficult, but he could not leave her there. With careful hands and unwavering determination, he lifted her onto his horse, supporting her as best as he could. The journey back to his homestead was slow and arduous, but he never faltered. Every mile brought her closer to safety and away from the dangers of the wild. As they reached the edge of his property, the woman began to feel a sense of relief she had not experienced since the attack. For the first time in hours, perhaps days, she felt protected. The retired sheriff led her inside, offered her water and food, and made a small bed where she could rest. She looked around, taking in the simple but clean space, and realized that she had been given a second chance at life. That night, as the Apache woman rested, the retired sheriff sat nearby, keeping watch. He knew that the journey to recovery would be long and difficult, but he was determined to stay by her side. In a world where so many had turned away, he had shown that courage, kindness, and compassion still existed. And though the Wild West was harsh and unforgiving, she had found a protector who would not let her face it alone. The morning sun streamed through the small window of the retired sheriff's cabin, casting a warm glow over the simple wooden interior. The Apache woman had spent a restless night, her body aching from the injury that had left her paralyzed. Yet, for the first time in days, she felt a sense of safety. The retired sheriff sat nearby, quietly preparing a meal, his presence a steady reassurance. Though he had lived a long life and seen much hardship, he treated her with care and patience as if she were the most important person in the world. At first, the Apache woman was hesitant to speak. She was proud and independent, accustomed to fending for herself. But the sheriff's gentle manner encouraged her to open up. She told him her name, shared stories of her childhood, and spoke of the tribe and land she had loved. The sheriff listened carefully, offering kind words and a steady hand when she needed support. It was in these moments that a bond began to form, one built on trust, respect, and shared humanity. Days turned into weeks as the woman slowly adapted to her new life. The retired sheriff taught her ways to make her surroundings more comfortable and manageable. He showed her how to use her hands to accomplish tasks she had once done with ease, such as preparing food, fetching water, and even small exercises that could help strengthen her upper body. Each small success was met with encouragement, and gradually, she began to regain confidence in her abilities. Despite the slow pace of recovery, the Apache woman refused to give in to despair. She was determined to reclaim some independence, even if her legs would never fully recover. She spent her time learning to move with a small wooden cart the sheriff had made, using it to carry supplies and explore the property around the cabin. The sheriff watched her closely, offering guidance and reassurance when needed, always careful not to push her beyond her limits. While the woman adapted to her new reality, news of her survival began to spread through the nearby settlement. The townspeople who had abandoned her were surprised and even ashamed. Some whispered among themselves, wondering if they should apologize or offer help, but pride and fear often held them back. Others, who had never respected her, continued to ignore her existence. Yet the Apache woman paid them little attention. focusing instead on the kindness and support she had found in the retired sheriff. The sheriff, aware of the whispers and gossip, taught her an important lesson. True strength came not from the approval of others, but from self-respect and resilience. He reminded her that she had survived against incredible odds, and that was something no one could take away. His words resonated deeply, reinforcing her determination to not only survive but thrive in her new circumstances. As the weeks passed, the Apache woman and the retired sheriff developed a daily routine that blended work, learning, and quiet reflection. The sheriff would tend to the small garden, planting vegetables and herbs, while the woman learned to care for the plants from her wheelchair. They shared meals together, spoke of their pasts, and sometimes simply sat in silence, listening to the wind rustle through the hills and the distant calls of wildlife. These simple moments, though quiet, were filled with a sense of peace and stability that the woman had not known in years. One afternoon, while the sun was high in the sky a brilliant blue, the sheriff suggested that the woman try a new exercise to strengthen her arms. Using ropes and pulleys, he demonstrated how she could lift small weights while seated, gradually building her strength. At first she was frustrated and exhausted, but the sheriff's encouragement never wavered. "Every step forward is progress," he told her, no matter how small. Slowly she began to see results, her arms growing stronger and her confidence increasing with each passing day. But life in the Wild West was never without danger. One evening, as the sheriff and the woman were preparing supper, a group of bandits from a nearby town appeared at the edge of the property. The sheriff acted quickly, using his knowledge of the land to hide the woman and protect her. He confronted the intruders, drawing on his years of experience to negotiate and dissuade them from causing harm. Though the encounter was tense, neither the sheriff nor the woman were harmed, and the bandits eventually left, wary of the sheriff's reputation and resolve. This incident reinforced the woman's understanding of the sheriff's character. He was brave, wise, and unwavering in his commitment to protect those who could not protect themselves. She began to realize that she was not just being cared for. She was being taught the ways to live again, to find strength and courage even when the world seemed harsh. She admired his dedication, and a deep respect grew between them, one that went beyond simple gratitude. As months went by, the Apache woman became more self-reliant within the cabin and surrounding land. She learned to manage chores, care for animals, and navigate the property safely. The sheriff continued to teach her survival skills adapted to her new condition, ensuring she could handle emergencies and daily challenges. Each day her confidence grew, and she began to see herself not as a victim but as a survivor and a fighter. The story of her survival eventually reached the settlement more widely. Some townspeople who had once abandoned her approached cautiously, offering apologies or assistance. The woman, guided by the sheriff's wisdom, responded with calm dignity. She forgave when she could, held firm when necessary, and made it clear that her life and recovery were her own. Her resilience inspired others, and slowly, a new respect for her emerged among those who had once doubted her strength. Through all this, the bond between the Apache woman and the retired sheriff deepened. They became companions, allies, and friends. The sheriff shared stories of his past, his regrets, and the lessons he had learned over decades of service. She in turn shared her own stories of her tribe, her family, and the hardships she had endured. Together they found comfort and understanding in each other's company, building a life of trust and mutual support. One day, the Apache woman looked out over the hills surrounding the cabin and reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the terror and hopelessness of that first day, lying alone and paralyzed, abandoned by those she had once considered neighbors. Yet through courage, determination, and the kindness of one remarkable man, she had found safety, purpose, and hope. The sheriff's unwavering support had shown her that even in a harsh world, compassion and bravery could make a real difference. She realized that life, no matter how difficult, could still be filled with meaning and connection. Her body might bear the marks of her struggle, but her spirit had grown stronger than ever. She felt empowered, not because the world had treated her kindly, but because she had chosen to rise above fear and despair. And beside her, the retired sheriff stood as a living reminder that courage and goodness still existed, even in the Wild West. As the seasons changed, the Apache woman and the sheriff continued their life together in harmony with the land. She learned new skills, found joy in small victories, and even began to help others who found themselves in need. Though she had once been left for dead, she had become a symbol of resilience, courage, and the enduring power of human kindness. And in every action, whether it was tending the garden, teaching a lesson, or simply sharing a meal, the bond between the Apache woman and the retired sheriff grew stronger, proving that hope and compassion could thrive even in the most unforgiving places. In the end, the story of the Apache woman and the retired sheriff became one of inspiration. It reminded all who heard it that even when people are abandoned, when life seems hopeless, a single act of courage and kindness can change everything. Their story was not just about survival. It was about reclaiming dignity, finding strength, and discovering the true power of human connection. The Apache woman had faced unimaginable odds, yet through resilience, determination, and the support of a compassionate soul, she had survived. And in doing so, she had transformed her life forever.